All right, everybody. Welcome to JCLive, your weekly source for JCL news and fun. I am Kurt Ristroff, your out-of-breath host and publications chair for the National Junior Classical League, an organization of middle and high school students in classics courses. Welcome to the show. Please join me in welcoming to the show Gary Baker and Dan Garrett, two old friends from SCL who are here today to form the From JCL to Economics panel. So how are y'all doing?
Hey, thanks, Kurt. Doing great.
I'm good.
Now, I say I'm out of breath because I had to run out of work and run back home to get here in time to do this show. So as a consequence, Dan and Gary and I didn't get to catch up before the stream to the extent that I normally catch up with the guests. So we're going to do that here live on air. So Dan, how's it going, man? I haven't talked to you in quite a while. How have you been?
Yeah, I think we haven't actually hung out face to face since about 2012. It's been a long time. Things have been good since then. I went to grad school. That's pretty much it. That's what's new with me. Yeah. Gary, how about you?
You should be able to start coming back to convention now, especially with it being online.
The convention happens during the National Bureau of Economic Research Summer Institute, though.
Oh, yeah,
It's the biggest conference for economists in the U.S. each year, which is still a bummer.
It's bigger than the ASSA?
It's not bigger. So ASSA, to keep people in the loop, is the American Social Science Association. Is that right?
It's the Allied Social Sciences, but it's really just the American Economic Association pretending to include other social sciences.
Hey, I'm actually a part of one of the other associations now. But that's an association. We get together in January. It's the first week of January every year. It's like 18,000, 20,000 economists at a hotel in some city. And it's, as you can imagine, a pretty wild time. In BER, SI is more like 500 to 1,000 at a hotel in Boston. That goes from like mid-June to late July, or mid-July to late August.
Wow. Yeah, nobody parties like economists, right?
That's right.
I have trouble saying that word too, and
It's not fair. Engineers do engineering. All the emphases on the word are in the same place. But economists do economics, right?
Yeah, we like to keep people on their toes.
The stress syllable is different. And then Gary, well, I should say where I know Dan from. Dan was, or Professor Garrett now, right? Was NSCL president when I was in JCL editor. So the NSCL president and vice president go to the fall planning meeting, and we all hung out. You know, the officers, the NJCL officers and the two SCL officers kind of hang out with each other. And Dan and I sat next to each other at, I forget which restaurant in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and had a grand old
I don't
time.
remember. All I remember is that I forgot my wallet. And that was pretty embarrassing. Yeah. Also, if you remember, the
that was
NSCL...
the first economist trick he taught me, was to forget your wallet.
And someone else will pay for dinner. Yeah, it's a good one. The NSCL vice president, if you'll remember, was not there.
Yeah.
So it was actually just me representing the NSCL at the time, which was a good time.
Oh, and your birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday.
That's right. Yeah, thanks.
Martina Bright and Dennis Webb in the chat both say hello. Those are some names y'all recognize.
Of course. I think Martine was on the NSCL board that year, but wasn't vice president.
Mm-hmm. And then Gary, gosh, I've known Gary forever, it seems like.
Well, probably 1 year after that, because I was the parliamentarian the year before. I think Dan was president. And then when you came into SCL, I think is when we really met.
Yeah. And Gary, you're finishing up your Ph.D. in economics at UW-Madison, is that? I hope that's right, because that's
finishing is one way.
Oh, okay.
Maybe not. It's not a good year to enter the job market. So
gotcha. But you're not in your first year or second year. You know,
no. I am in my seventh year. I've taken longer than most people do. I'm in a field where it's difficult to get a job. So you have to be very, very ready to be done when you graduate.
Gotcha. So speaking of your fields, while we're doing intros and things like that, can you tell us and tell the stream a little bit about what you do, both In technical terms, if they want to Google it, the buzzword version, and then also the layperson version, because I'm here and I want to understand what you do.
Looks like you've got an echo, Kurt, on
I do.
somewhere.
Two voices are coming across as duplicates, not understandable. Uh-oh.
Technical difficulties. I hope it's not
Are
me.
y'all hearing me twice?
I only hear you once.
Yeah, well, we're not on the YouTube, I think. So.
Okay, hang on. 1 second, everybody. 1 second. Okay, I'm not getting it. I just loaded the stream in another tab and I wasn't hearing that. So Monsieur, maybe try refreshing the page. I'm not sure what's up with that. If it continues and if anybody else is having that problem, please let me know.
Well, is it only happening when either Dan or I talk? I don't, because we weren't talking when.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you want us to test? We can just have a small talk chat while you check the other tab.
Yes, please.
Is it? Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll start talking about something and see if people can hear. Continues. Okay, perfect. It's interesting. So I'll start talking. Not perfect. If that's the technical problem continuing. I wonder if it's me.
Is it me? Am I?
Continues. Okay, it's interesting.
Just in case, I don't normally have an issue.
It was fine on the other tab for both of y'all. I don't know.
Okay, well, we can just keep going.
Yeah, Monsieur, you don't happen to have it open in two tabs.
It's only when I talk.
It's only when Dan talks. Okay. This is a new issue. We haven't encountered this before.
I could change which microphone I'm using. But yeah, if it sounds fine to you, that shouldn't matter.
I switched to headphones just in case it was a feedback on my end, but I usually don't have an issue with that.
I'll adjust the audio volumes a little bit on my end. But let's continue with the small talk test, and we'll see if it continues. So are you going to say, Dan?
Okay, can everyone still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, so what I do now, a little bit, I don't think I had a very good idea of what an economist did until about my third year of graduate school. But a lot of what I work on now is I call myself a tax economist. My background is in tax forecasting before grad school. I was a tax forecaster for the state of Ohio. At this point, I work on a lot of topics about how individuals, business, investors, and workers respond to public finance shocks. So a lot of what I do is I read newspapers and legislative guides and try to think about what are we not thinking about when we're worried about some public finance issue. So I work a lot on municipal debt markets, and my most recent papers have been on corporate taxation and particularly depreciation incentives. So when we think about taxes, most people don't like taxes. Most people think taxes are pretty boring, and to some degree they're right. But if we think that public goods are something that can matter sometimes, then we really should care about how we raise money to pay for them. So one of the things that we do, of course, is we tax corporations. So we take the difference between how much money they make when they sell goods and how much money they spent making those goods. And the difference between those two things we call net income, and we tax net income at some ad valorem rate, so from the value. So like a percent of that net income then is taxed as corporate tax. But how you actually define what costs are is very far from trivial. So a lot of subsidization of corporate investment happens through giving businesses more things that they can count as costs and letting them count those things as costs faster. So I study how that affects kind of corporate decisions, location decisions, and hiring decisions, where I mostly work in a lot of firm level statistics, where I have databases of businesses and establishments all over the US. And I say, how does their employment change and how does their investment change after they are actually kind of after they have some tax change that's trying to induce investment.
So
people still can't hear.
I think it seems to be just Ms. Shearer, unfortunately, because other people are saying it's fine. I'm not sure what to say, honestly. Maybe restart the computer. That may help.
You're talking me?
No. Maybe to
Oh,
Ms. Shearer.
okay.
Maybe she should try restarting the computer. That may help.
Okay.
So you say tax forecasting. So you're trying to determine what some of these unintended consequences, or not unintended consequences, but what the changing landscape of incentives and disincentives is going to be before public policy takes place, or
yeah. So that's how I started.
And you say, "I told you so."
That's how I started. Was for the state of Ohio when we were talking about changing some corporate tax incentives around the commercial activities tax. I worked with a team of people that was trying to describe what would be like the revenue effect of that.
Mm-hmm.
As an economist, that's not like the revenue effect is not usually something that economists think is an interesting question. Economists like to step one step further and think more about the mechanisms about why the revenue changes in the way it does. How does this affect workers? So particularly, I would think now a lot of my work is here's a corporate tax change. So one of the things I'm working on is bonus depreciation. Which is a style of speeding up the rate at which you are able to deduct costs from your taxable income for investment that you do. So right now, since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, in the US, we're under a regime where there is 100% bonus depreciation or complete expensing. So I take that sort of variation.
What does that mean exactly?
That means if you are, to give you a firm example from my hometown, if you are AK Steel and you are building a big new machine that's going to change the way in which you're rolling steel, instead of deducting costs from operating that machine over time, you're going to deduct all of those costs from your taxable income all at once.
And I choose when I can do that, or I do it at the beginning?
You do it at the beginning, and you always want to do it at the beginning. And this comes down to the time value of money.
Yeah.
And that if you're going to get a tax deduction, if you get it sooner, it's more valuable than if you get it later, even if it's the same amount. So right now, most investment in the US is totally deducted all at once. So we're not really following the classic depreciation schedules of the last 40 years. So I look at how this affects different businesses. So one cool thing about incentivizing investment through depreciation is that it really affects firms that invest in longer-lived assets more. So like if you're a steel mill and you're building a production line that you're going to be using for 20, 30, 40 years, that depreciation incentive of being able to move all of those costs into year zero is way bigger than if you're a small software developer that's buying a new computer that you write off in 1 year anyway. So this subsidy has really big cross-sectional effects where certain businesses get really big subsidies and certain businesses don't get any subsidy at all. So I use I use a lot of that sort of variation in my work. I can stop talking and Gary can go so we don't mess up the sound.
No, I think it's okay. This may be a case where for whatever reason Monsieur is having the problem and other people aren't, so I bet watching the replay things will be fine for her, or maybe restarting the computer will help. I'm not sure. Or watching on a phone, if there's another computer to try. I'm not sure what the deal is. But now I'm getting a little bit worried because it's 8:15 and Dan has already gone through time value of money. So we are approaching the edge of what I know about economic theory from engineering, right? So at the end of the engineering curriculum is design class, where for chemical engineering at least, we talk about, okay, what if you had to build a chemical plant to produce 100 tons of cumene a year? And it's all about time value of money and depreciation and capital investment, CapEx, OpEx, all these kinds of things. And I think anything beyond that is going to be beyond me. So I'll try to ask intelligent questions. But Gary,
I can give a quick overview of what I do. Unlike Dan is actually an economist. I'm questionably an economist because I am a pure theorist. So I basically do mathematics and pure statistics. So my main research is mostly focused on how do you value and demand information. So you could think of like really abstractly, information might be something like a newspaper article, but more concretely, and what I'm doing, the better way to think about it is what's the value of like an observation in a data set or a single run of some kind of experiment. And thinking, okay, well, I've got two different experiments that I can run. I'm trying to learn about some underlying truth of the world. I can probe at it with two different experimental designs. They might have different costs. And I want to know how do I design kind of an optimal combination of experiments to best make use of the money I have to spend on my research design. That's my main paper, roughly. But it's all very abstract and of questionable actual use. I have other papers looking at, how is information valued? Say you're a doctor trying to determine if a patient has a disease like COVID, in which case you might be running multiple tests over time. So you might start with kind of what's called a screening test, which is designed to pick up as many people who have the disease as possible at the cost of it's going to have a lot of false positives. You're going to tell a lot of people they have the disease when they don't actually have it. So then you run a follow-up test saying, okay, this test is going to be much more specific. It's going to tell us for sure, does this person have the disease? So you might have certain screening tests for certain types of cancer. Those tend to return false positives pretty frequently. But if you return a positive, you might then follow that up with some procedure like a biopsy to tell for sure. So you know whether or not you have the disease before you start on a very costly treatment regimen. But again, I would say that in terms of the doctor's problem, the doctors, I think, already know what the optimal testing schedule is. So this is really an academic exercise to come up with a mathematical solution to the problem. I dabble a little bit in other areas that are a little bit more economics-y. So I've got some ongoing work on bargaining problems. So I'm looking at data from eBay. So if you've used eBay, you know that eBay has a couple different ways of selling things. Probably you're familiar with the auction system on eBay, but also eBay has a bargaining type system where you have the best offer or buy it now. So with best offer, you put in an offer to the seller sees it, they decide, do I want to accept it or do I want to make a counter offer? And you can go back and forth. So there's a lot of really good data on how do people actually bargain in practice with that. But that's much more at an early stage and still trying to kind of understand the data there.
So in that bit, you're getting a big data set from eBay and you're working your way through it, or you're trying to build a predictive model?
Yeah, step one is kind of going through the data and understanding the data. That I mostly have done. The data it's indirectly from eBay. This is publicly available data that came from eBay. Step two would be to kind of find some style. I have some ideas, some patterns in the data that don't match the traditional bargaining models, and then trying to come up with, okay, well, what's a natural explanation for this? So for example, the pattern that I'm mostly focused on right now is that if you look at the best offer data, so the seller has a buy it now price. You can just buy it. You can click the buy it now, you pay the seller's initial price, and you're done. No bargaining is done. So that's effectively the same as taking the seller's initial offer. If you also look at the data, you see that the seller's initial offer on that platform is about 25% higher than it would be if they sold it on the auction platform or just for a fixed price. Mm-hmm. So even though the seller's first offer is above kind of the normal market price, people buy it now half the time, in spite of the fact also that sellers typically respond pretty quickly, and they'll typically take an offer that's up to 20% less than their initial offer. So that's kind of puzzling because the simplest explanation for it is that people have very implausibly high costs of delay, that they're not willing to wait, an hour. Like the implied impatience on that would be kind of implausible. It would imply behaviors and other aspects that don't make sense. So,
speaking only from personal experience, when I go to buy a Bionicle set from 2003 on eBay, and I see one with the buy it now option, I don't realize that I can reach out to the seller and offer them 20% less. And I really have a high aversion to going through the whole bidding process because I don't want somebody else to get that set. So,
well,
that's why
not
I buy
every
it now.
listing with buy it now has that option. So it's
No, I mean,
if it
like,
has the option, it's obvious.
you know,
But,
if there are two versions, you know, somebody's selling Tanakh Cal from 2003, and there are two listings, and has a buy it now option, and the other one is just an auction. I won't go to the auction because I hate the auction thing. I don't want to get sniped at the last minute. I don't want to get my hopes up. So to what
and
extent does
I'll admit that
psychology
even
come in? Yeah.
even with the bargaining, even knowing the data with me, at least for cheap things, I don't bother making offers. I just buy it now if I can. The explanation that I can give that I think explains it for me is that people are worried about losing like if it's kind of something you have to wait a long time for it to come up again, you're worried that someone else is also making offers to the seller that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a bargaining model that's not actually in the literature, where there's multiple buyers bargaining with the seller at the same time, and they're not aware of each other. Typical bargaining models, the seller is bargaining with a single person at a time. They can break off bargaining with that person to try a new person, but it's always one at a time. And eBay has this property that there could always be someone else that you as the buyer don't know about, and you're risking losing it to them if you don't act fast. So that's kind of the...
But isn't that assumption on one bargaining at a time, that's usually for computational ease, like if you're actually going to estimate, like...
Oh, so one issue with bargaining models in the theory literature is that they all have a billion equilibria. Like there's no limit to the equilibria. Are basically anything goes.
That's not limited to the theoretical literature.
Yeah,
The
well, there's
empirical
certain
papers also have
classes, there's certain equilibria that look nice, that are the kinds that people study. But in reality, anything can happen. So I was actually thinking of doing it kind of non-equilibrium and saying, okay, well, I've got the data. Can I maybe model the seller flexibly, say, train some kind of algorithm to behave as a seller would be, and then from the buyer side, knowing what the seller behaves like in practice from the data, what is the seller's optimal behavior, and see if I can tease out what's the implied kind of level of impatience, what do the buyers believe their risk of losing the item to someone else is based on their behaviors. So, bargaining's it's a hard problem to do in a fully equilibrium setting, except in very, very nice circumstances. Like everyone knows the valuation, like in the classical model is, I know the value, you have an item I want, there's just the two of us, you know the value, I know the value. Basically what happens is the seller makes an initial offer, the buyer immediately accepts it, and we're done. There's no kind of interesting stuff happening there. But that's not how bargaining works in practice. In reality, you know stuff I don't, I know stuff you don't. We have to kind of haggle back and forth. The haggling process kind of reveals as we go bits about our own valuations and what we're willing to and not willing to take. So
I'm willing to bet that y'all are both really good at board games.
In theory.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, these are...
We have a weekly game night with some of my friends where we play all sorts of random board games. One of our friends like really studies these things and is pretty good at it. I'm not so much. I did spend some time a few years ago trying to get into Go, like reading some books on it because Go is very interesting to me. But I don't have anyone to play with.
So you both described two very different, it sounds like, subfields of economics, where Dan is doing empirical things and Gary's training algorithms. How do you decide what to specialize in? If that's a broad enough question to keep us going for a little bit.
Do you mind if I paint a broad picture of the field?
Please do.
Something I didn't know. I'm thinking, who is the audience here? If I was a high schooler, I wanted to know what is economics. I don't think even when you're starting an undergrad economics degree that you actually have much of a clue of what the field is. Economics is very large. But it's
even finishing an undergrad degree, you don't have
even finishing. The the field is massive, but it's a style of thought and a set of tools more than necessarily a set of results. But at a very high level, there of course are macroeconomists and microeconomists. Gary and I are both microeconomists. The macroeconomists ask a different set of questions, but are using a very similar set of tools. Within microeconomics, you have, of course, and within macroeconomics, you have theory and empirical work. But empirical work covers absolutely everything. So people like to call economics the imperial social science, and that we like to take anything like a problem of a doctor and a patient interacting and deciding what diagnostic test to apply. We'll try to answer a question like that. Well, I'm also trying to answer questions about how to set up. I also work with these auctions and municipal bonds. So how do you set up the best auction in a municipal bond setting between a series of potential underwriting banks and a relatively uninformed municipal like financial manager? How do you set these transactions up such that the banks don't take advantage of people? So I think that's like a traditional economic question. Within micro, the traditional fields are like on the theory side, you have game theory and you have mechanism design. And I'm not going to get all the fields in theory. You'll have to get them, Gary. But
that's good enough.
You've kind of the applied micro side, which is going to be trade. What happens when countries trade with each other? You've got industrial organization, which is how do you set up markets in the first place? You've got public economics, which is everything to do with studying any consumption or production decision that has effects on other people. So that's what I technically do. That was my field in grad school. And there's also going to be labor economics. How do people make decisions to invest in their productivity, and how do they make working decisions? And then I'm drawing a blank on, there's at least 2 or 3 more that kind of are broadly speaking important. So labor also has a bunch of stuff underneath it. So people who study education policy and people who study healthcare usually all fall under this kind of labor umbrella, labor economics. Very big field with thousands of people studying it. But how you decide what to do? I have no idea.
Yeah, for me it was I got my undergraduate degree in econ and math from a small liberal arts college. Somehow managed to get into a decent Ph.D. program. Got into first year, was woefully unprepared, but the first year theory classes I really enjoyed, so I decided to do theory. And that was it. There was not really. I came into the PhD thinking I was going to do labor economics and kind of macro economic type stuff. And then actually started taking graduate level courses, learned what things were actually like, and decided theory seems fun. But a piece of advice, if you're in high school, so this is kind of early to be deciding things like graduate school, but don't do theory if you go into economics. So the nice thing about an economics PhD compared to most PhDs is that the job market typically is very favorable. So even most PhDs, I think your goal is to become a professor of some sort, and the academic market is very, very tight. But for economics, the academic market isn't so bad. Not this year. This year sucks. But in a normal year, there's a pretty sizable academic market, and there's a huge market outside of academia, in the private sector and government for econ PhDs. So it's one of the more practical PhDs to get. But at this stage in high school, I would encourage people to take economics classes and also other social science classes.
And take some math classes. Take things you think are going to be fun, and try to learn about random stuff. Try to learn about everything.
Yes,
take AP statistics if you can. Right.
Yeah, AP statistics will be more useful than AP economics. AP economics is, in my experience, not very good. It's unfortunate that my understanding of I get students in 101 when I used to teach 101 who took AP economics, and they usually come in not very well prepared for Econ 101. I think that there's some kind of strange decisions being made at the kind of school level with the sort of person who's assigned to teach economics typically hasn't had economics, whereas that sort of teacher is normally teaching classes that they have had courses in. So I think it's just an issue that it's hard to find high school teachers who can really teach it.
Whereas an AP Stats class is probably taught by a mathematician.
Yeah, so an AP Stats class will be much better prep, I think, for actual economics work in undergrad, because I think it's something the teacher is more likely to have expertise in.
Dan, you look like you disagree.
I somewhat disagree. I think it's really hard to teach people's first econ course. There are always
that's also true for sure.
Huge disagreements about people's first econ course. And so there's been a big movement in the last 2 or 3 years to stop even mentioning anything like a perfectly competitive equilibrium in like a first year econ course. Just because people think we describe a lot of markets in abstraction that people then try to take away as this is how the market we live in works. And then thinking that we haven't done a very good job describing all of the frictions and the really interesting things and the asymmetries that exist that make markets really interesting, and underselling that and teaching us some sort of like set of facts is very challenging. So I think there are really disagreements about how to approach a first year econ course. Luckily, I don't have to teach first year econ anymore. I now teach second year finance, which is a lot of fun.
I eventually hope to get some sort of job at a liberal arts college where I'd be largely teaching intro classes. So I also have a set of opinions on first year econ classes, and it's something that everybody disagrees about. Like I have a very I'm very against kind of this new trend of like de-emphasizing the perfect competition. Like I think we need to emphasize more the non-perfect competition models, but you have to start with perfect competition, because otherwise talking about things like what does it mean to be a friction? Like even the fact that we call it a friction is defined with reference to the perfectly competitive model. So you sort of have to start with that. We do need to do a better job of explaining that the perfect competition model is really purely a foundation upon which to build actual usable models. It's not actually a useful model unless you're talking about corn markets. You have to, there's basically no markets are perfectly competitive. It's really purely useful as a baseline to build on top of. So it's, teaching economics. I don't mean to be critical of anyone when I talk about teaching economics, because no one agrees on what the optimal way to teach economics is.
Sit in grad school for 7 years and argue with people at seminars until you have a really good idea of what you're thinking about. I had no idea what it really was. But it's a big world and area of study.
Yeah, I would say if you forced me to say what I thought economics was, I would say at the very highest level, it's just the study of how humans make decisions. It's distinct from other social sciences in terms of its approach, which tends to be more quantitative than the other social sciences. That's a limitation and a plus. On the one hand, we're confined by having to phrase our models in this rigorous mathematical framework. But on the other hand, that gives us a very powerful kind of formalism to say things very, very precisely. So it's one of many ways of approaching the study of human behavior. I say human behavior, although there's a fairly famous paper in a top journal about the behavior of ants using economic models. So you can just say behavior.
And it sounds like, so I didn't know a lot of this about economics, so this is great. I'm learning too, which is terrific. It sounds like for the students out there who are interested in the computer science, the big data, the algorithms, there's absolutely a place for that in the field of economics.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of what actual economists, not people like me, but people like Dan, are doing it's very computational. So even what I do, I rely on computational methods all the time. Like I'm not using data so much, but I'm running simulations a lot. So having a strong basis in programming of some sort. So any number of programming languages. I do a lot of stuff in Python, for example. It's probably a language at least some people have heard of, and some other languages that people have maybe not heard of. Dan probably does, I assume, stuff in a program called Stata.
I do some Stata. Stata is a very specific to economists program. I do work in Stata, R, and MATLAB primarily.
Oh, I like MATLAB.
Yep, I like
MATLAB's
MATLAB
great.
too. Yep, MATLAB is.
So MATLAB, so a lot of so my work, yes, very much so. Everything I do is big database management. I've been working with a set of 2 billion municipal bond trades the last few days, and getting anything out of all of these transactions is a little bit tricky, just because the data are large, and getting a program that can run it is large, and doing the things I want to do to the trades is tricky. So yeah, some coding background is going to be a must for an empirical economist.
Even for a theorist, you need coding background because you have to be able to simulate stuff.
Yeah, the coding backgrounds are going to be a little bit different. I simulate a little bit. I've done simulated method of moments for an empirical auction model before, which is so a lot of municipal bonds, of course, sold at a first price sealed bid auction, and you can put some parameters and some distributions over how people are setting up their values and their bids, and you can back out values from bids, and that takes, again, a very long time. A lot of this is computationally very intensive. But so to be a really good economist, I think you do need a big set of tools. You need to know a little bit about the world, about the institutions. You need to know some history. You need to know a lot of formal math. You need to know some coding. All of these things are helpful. But a lot of us work in really different institutions, and I think the things that I did not expect to help me the most are history. Just kind of knowing what weird things have happened historically that can be studied, I think is really helpful. So you have to be a very well-rounded person, I think, to be a successful economist.
Yeah, I would take this opportunity. So I went to a small liberal arts college undergrad, and I'm hoping to get a job at a place like that. So this would also be a time for me to plug small liberal arts colleges as an option for your bachelor's degree, especially for economics, because you really have to be a little bit of everything. You got to be a little bit of a philosopher, a little bit of a mathematician, a little bit of a statistician, a little bit of a historian. So like for me, I took, philosophy classes, political science classes. Of course, I took Latin and Greek, although Latin and Greek was not directly useful to my economics class, although knowing the Greek alphabet is useful for math occasionally.
When your equations get too many parameters and you just need more.
I can silently judge some of the senior professors who don't know the difference between a phi and a psi. But yeah, it's to be good at it. You can't be good at just one thing. I think there's a lot of economists who I think do, at least in my field of theory, I think there's a lot of economists who really wish they were mathematicians, and thus I think don't do very good economics. And that's because to do good economics, you really have to do a lot. You have to be a very kind of polymathic sort of person. You got to be willing to learn, maybe not become an expert on everything, but at least get kind of a pretty good level of knowledge on a lot of different subject areas.
Well, that's perfect, because that leads directly into my next question, which is, the stream is titled From JCL to Economics. So can you all tell us, and we'll start with Dan, a little bit about your time in JCL, a little bit about any of the things that you kept or held on to or have helped you out, or any of that?
I thought about this. I had a feeling you were going to ask something about this. I guess that
your predictive model was correct.
So I got into Latin because my older brother was in Latin. So I took Latin class with the famous Amy Ellifritz, who I think was the national chair for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So fabulous teacher, really good course, great classmates. I didn't really know why I took Latin. I didn't have any specific interest in it beyond just kind of, it seemed like the natural thing to do. My brother said the teachers were amazing. He was right. And that was really cool. Then I started going to the conventions, and I was blown away by the quality of people with whom I was interacting at conventions. Like my first national convention, I was a random roommate with a guy from my state delegation who wound up in like one of the top 10 people at like the big overall awards. And he was running marathons, and he was inviting me to all this stuff. And I was like, wow, this person is so cool. I want to be really good at stuff because this person's really good at stuff. And so I think that the biggest thing from JCL for me, that I think, thinking back to like how different would my life have been if I signed up for Spanish instead? I think Latin attracted a quality of hardworking people who rubbed off on me in a really positive ways. And I think that was a good thing for me. So I'm not sure I actually took that much from the Latin itself in terms of like where I wound up. I very well might have. I don't know. But when I started getting into economics and empirical data work, I don't think about the Aeneid very often, although it comes up from time to time. But I think most of it is the people who study Latin and engaging with a group of people who are having a lot of fun, getting really good at learning a thing. And I think that was really positive for me. So I think that was great. JCL then, of course, gave me the opportunities. The SCL was very fun, gave me a group of friends to kind of travel through life with, people that you can reach out to. You get really close friends by engaging with the conventions and with the organization and the people involved. Always very fun. So I think to me, it's only by circumstance that I don't wind up using it a lot in my daily life. But it was a great learning experience where I learned how to learn and I hung out with really good people.
Terrific. Gary, your turn.
Yeah, so Dan and I probably got into JCL probably the same time, more or less. Unlike Dan, I know exactly.
Tennessee or was it?
Mine was Indiana, but it was more or less same time, within a year. Because we're pretty much the same age. I know exactly why I got into Latin, and it was because there was only one accent mark, and most of the time you didn't need to deal with it. For some reason, I just couldn't deal with the accent marks in Spanish and French, so I took Latin. And it turned out I really liked it. And I went, my first convention was 2006, and I've missed one since then. And I would agree with most of pretty much everything that Dan said. It's just, it was a good environment to be in. Kind of, I learned how to really study something. Like in 2007, it was the 1 year I played for Florida on the Kratomon team, and I was the historian. So in the camera, y'all definitely can't make out my books, but like I've got my Carian Scullard and my Finnegan and Boac history books still back there. I don't really open them. They're mostly decorative at this point, but yeah, I mean, that was when, I really learned how to kind of force myself, sit down and really become an expert on something for the first time. Dan, my Latin doesn't really come up that much for me, except as fun anecdotes. People like to hear fun stories from Latin conventions sometimes. This is kind of a weird place to someone who's never been in an environment like that.
Well, that's a different answer from what we've gotten from the other folks. The lawyers and the doctors. They said, oh, well, JCL was great. Studying Latin was great because the humanity and learning to more about like the well-rounded education and things like that.
Well, there's that too.
And I was expecting them to say, oh, it was really helpful in anatomy class when I needed to learn the Latin names for all the different bones, and I knew Latin already, so that was great. And they didn't say that. They were talking about how, being a well-rounded person and all that. And then y'all come.
It's useful in economics because you know what ceteris paribus means without anybody telling you what it means. Yeah, I think that's the only Latin phrase that we use.
I put that in almost all of my papers to the point that I've been told to stop, but just like once per paper. But anyway, but that's a very interesting take. The learning to become good at something, learning to get good at learning something. And the last question or another question, Gary was mentioning about how he'll anecdotally talk about fun times and wacky stories from Latin convention. Do y'all have any fun times or wacky stories from Latin convention?
If you put me on the spot, I probably can't come up with one.
Okay, I'll do mine first. This was Miami, 2008, Miami of Ohio, Oxford. I was there with, it was really close to my high school, which was really convenient for, I knew a few people there, and we got together, and one day I didn't realize we'd all brought instruments with us, which in retrospect is probably a little bit annoying, but it was really awesome. We got together and we had like a fiddle and some crazy instruments, and we all sang Collide in a dorm lobby for like half an hour, and it was so silly that it was very fun. So
that's the perfect kind of spontaneous wacky nonsense for JCL.
Yeah, and that was made some good friends there.
Yeah, to be honest, I remember so little of my JCL conventions because they're a pretty distinct minority of the conventions I've been to at this point, and they were so long ago.
You can tell SCL stories too. While you're thinking, Martina Bright said, "Fun fact: Dan was my first NJCL friend outside of my in-state delegation."
I think Martina might have been one of my first non-Ohio friends as well. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Come on, Gary. You've been to like 20 conventions. You have to have a good story.
I know. The more I feel like the more conventions you go to, the harder it is to come up with.
What was the wackiest thing that happened while you were running for parliamentarian?
For JCL parliamentarian or SCL?
Yeah. Because that's like a totally different experience when you're running for JCL.
I mean, the very fact that I made it on a nom-com was pretty wacky. But I'm trying to remember, I think it may have been Kentucky. There was one state that was like really pro me for JCL. Now it's been so long. There's definitely no JCLers who are around for that. That was 13 years ago now. I did not win that election, but maybe it was Kentucky. I don't remember. It was one of those states kind of in the east middle of the country. They were really gung-ho about me and started like a fan club on Facebook. But yeah, running for JCL office it's a thing.
I'll say there were lots of copying of your parliamentarian ads and campaigning at the state level in Ohio the next few years. I remember that.
I don't even remember except for Parliamentary Gary, which is still a thing.
But everyone was trying to fit their name into parliamentarian for the next few years.
Oh boy.
Yeah, my Robert's rules still do get used because that's something I still do. All of my parliamentary procedure books are on this segment of my bookshelf.
During SCLGAs at nationals.
The past couple of years, I have stopped trolling the board. I try to support the parliamentarians now. I feel like the age difference now is I can't keep trolling them. I now try to help them prep before the meetings to try to keep people under control.
For some context, Dan, my favorite question now to ask the SCL parliamentarian candidates is: you're walking home from GA to your dorm room at night, or after fellowship to your dorm room at night. Suddenly, lightning flashes, and you were surrounded by 10 former parliamentarians who are all snapping in unison and walking slowly towards you while saying that what you're doing is wrong. What do you do? I ask this every year because it's something that they will experience in office.
Is the 10 parliament? Yeah, I believe it.
Somehow there's this kind of weird rivalry that's arisen between the parliamentarians and the editors.
Yeah, I think the editors
both of these guys are editors.
As a former editor, I think that's the party I want to be a part of. We're fun people.
Yeah, the editors help each other.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
For some reason, the parliamentarians don't keep coming back quite as often as the editors do. We're very much outnumbered in terms of the former editors versus the former parliamentarians, I think.
Yeah. Dan, did you have your team editor T-shirt?
I don't think I ever got one, actually, because you got the T-shirts in 2013, right? Or was it 2014? I'd actually been later than that.
2013. Yeah,
you were editor in 2013, right?
Yeah, SCL, yeah. Well, I was about to order this year's set. when you're ordering 2 shirts or ordering 3 shirts, the per shirt cost.
If I'm still invited,
oh, of course, yeah. No, I'll get you one. I'll just need to know the year, or I can look that one up, and then next time I'm in Philadelphia, I can drop it off because you're at Wharton. We forgot to mention that you're at Wharton now.
Yeah, I'm at Wharton now, so I'm living in Philadelphia, which is weird. I haven't been on campus yet.
Oh.
I haven't been into my office yet because you have to get tested twice in 1 week to get into your office, and I keep losing. It's a whole ordeal to get into campus as faculty.
Gee.
Yeah, we have the same problem. Well, it's not twice a week, but it's once a week for us. So it's easier for me just to stay home until I get vaccinated.
I have a nice set of computers all around me, so I don't want to take the time to move.
Yep, that's the same
into my office.
My big computer I leave in the office so I don't have to pay for the electricity, and then everything else I have in my office, at home.
Terrific. And y'all have, I'm guessing, Dan, you're using a cluster, a dedicated on-campus cluster for some of your stuff? Your computationally intensive?
Some of it, yes. The problem is you have to get the data onto it to use it. So I actually still use an old Duke cluster I have access to that already had data on it. So that's where I did my PhD at Duke. So I have the old Duke Econ cluster access that I'm still using at the moment, which technically I'm still a student this semester.
I won't tell.
So don't let them kick me off the cluster. But yeah, so actually I do most of my work. I try to keep the data sets pretty small and just work on a desktop.
Gotcha.
But yeah, next time you're through Philly, let me know.
No, I will. I'll absolutely. It might be in a month or two, actually. So,
Okay.
no, this is great because the t-shirts, I mean, when you order one t-shirt from Custom Ink, it's like $30 per shirt. And when you order two, it's like $25 per shirt. So if I'm about to order this year's for Anne, who's the SCL editor, and Irene, who's the JCL editor. So might as well get three. What's your t-shirt size?
Do I have to say that on air?
No, you don't. You can email me afterwards. Of course, my bad.
I think I'm a small most of the time.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. I mean, if there's nothing else, normally I end with what advice would you have for current high schoolers who are considering economics, but y'all have already gone into detail on that.
Can we give one more piece of advice?
Go for it.
I don't know. You can never make me be quiet. I would give the piece of advice that if you have an interest in economics graduate school, you should try everything else. Make sure it's actually what you want to do. Don't plan your life around being an economist because it's not for everyone and it's pretty weird and it's sometimes a painful process going to grad school and all that. So try a lot of stuff. Try a lot of stuff and have fun.
My advisor, one of my former advisors who recently passed away, used to give the advice to people who were considering doing theory, which I think is good advice if you're considering any sort of graduate school. Don't do it unless you can't imagine yourself doing literally anything else, because it's a very painful experience, and there's so many ways to lead a fulfilling life and have a comfortable job that pays you enough to live comfortably that don't require the unpleasantness. You have to have a very particular goal in mind to want to do graduate school. So I would encourage people to take economics classes, take classes in as broad of subject areas as you can, and then maybe around second year start thinking about, do you really want to do something graduate school in some kind of subject?
But if you're going to do graduate school at all, economics is a pretty
good way
to go.
Yep.
Terrific.
Fun.
All right. Well, we're gonna transition now over to the officer reports. So, like I said earlier, I'll be back in 5 minutes or so to thank y'all properly and everything else. But while you're still on here, thank you both so much. It's been terrific having y'all on. I think the chat has really enjoyed it. Dennis and Martina and Kyle, McJimsey, and others are all saying thanks and everything else. So I'll see y'all again in a couple of minutes.
See you later.
All right, with that, we're going to transition over to our officer report. Oh,
So
I'm sorry, Vivian. Wait, hang on. I need to go tell the economists to stop.
Is he gonna come back and yell at us?
Yes, please don't talk.
Oh.
Vivian, I'm sorry, I've been unmuted. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty great. How about you?
Awesome, I'm good. Okay, let me bring you on. You are on. So, welcome to the show. What have you got for us this week?
So I wanted to talk primarily about the Video of the Month contest. I have decided to implement a sort of theme for each month. It's more of a guideline. You don't have to follow it if you're submitting anything to the Video of the Month contest, but I felt like it could give you a sort of inspiration for what you can make for that month. For March, it is spring, so any sort of outdoor activity that you want to film and put a little video together, maybe you can edit in some like flowers and stuff. It's up to you. You can do like a slideshow of pictures. Just March is spring, so submit to the Video of the Month report.
All right, and those are due at the end of the month, which is a little bit more than a week from now. If you're looking for inspiration, you can check out the last month's, maybe 2 months ago, video of the month winners in the Torch US, which there is a link to in the description of this video that came out on March 1st, 3 weeks ago today. So you can go read that, and there are video of the month winners there for all you video editors who are looking for inspiration. All right. Otherwise, how are things going, Vivian? I think Annie's going to join in a minute, so we'll wait for her for a couple of seconds.
Pretty good. I mean, school's pretty relaxed right now. Spring break is next week. Just 4 more days of school, and then spring break.
Good. Do you have any big plans?
No. Just kind of sleeping and stuff. I mean, I can't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because pandemic.
But unlike Thanksgiving break in the fall semester, you don't have to worry about college applications or anything like that. You kind of get to relax for spring break.
Yeah.
Good.
So I'm looking forward to it, yeah.
Good. Could you text Annie?
Yeah.
By any chance? Because we'll hang out and wait for her. Oh, while we are doing that, I will give the updates for the next couple of weeks worth of shows, which I forgot to do at the beginning. So, this week was From JCL to Economics and is our last career panel discussion for a while. So thank you very much to Dan and Gary for coming on and talking all about what they do. That was a lot of good fun. Next week's show is SCL Live. So the SCL, it's not going to be JCL Live, it's going to be SCL Live. So 2 members of the SCL Publicity Committee will be coming on along with the SCL president. I believe that's right. It might be 3 national officers. I don't exactly remember. The publicity committee has been helping to plan the stream. They're going to come on, and there'll be co-hosts, and we'll talk all about SCL, and we'll take questions from the audience, and we'll give you an overview of what SCL is, what they do, some of the behind the scenes for things like That's Entertainment, Olympic Eludi, all that. The week after that will be, so April 5th now, we'll be having a special guest, Mr. Ken Schneider, who was NJCL vice president in 1981 and 82. You notice I didn't say first vice president or second vice president because there weren't first and second VPs back then. He was just the VP. So he'll talk about his time in JCL, what he did then, what he's doing now, that kind of thing. The week following, so SC Live, then Mr. Schneider, then the next week will be the current and former Virginia JCL presidents will be coming on to talk about state office onboarding, transitioning from one state board to another state board and how to keep traditions and things running smoothly and efficiently across multiple boards. And they'll be running some kind of game or interactive bit that hasn't been decided yet. So those are the next 3 shows worth. And with that, yeah, exciting shows coming up. Anything from Annie, Vivian? She emailed me just earlier today, so I know she's planning to come.
She didn't answer my message, but
Okay.
I'm not sure.
We'll give her another minute. It's all okay. The officers are very busy, and it's a lot of me. It is a lot for me to ask them to come on Mondays like this. So certainly officers are people. They've got homework. They've got other things going on. So video of the month. Did you get a lot of submissions for the last couple of months?
Not particularly.
So that means that if you make a good video of the month, you random person watching this video in 2025, you could win.
Yeah, I kind of made the themes to hopefully get more submissions.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, we'll be advertising on social media. If you want to put out a reminder or something like that, we can certainly make that and post that. Let us see. It's a little bit past the hour now, so I think we're going to go ahead and call it. We'll say that's our show. Thanks, everybody, for watching. JCL Live. We'll be back next week, like we said, with JCLive, that'll be a lot of fun. And then the week after, I've already gotten confused. Yeah, JCLive, and then Mr. Schneider, and then the Virginia JCL presidents talking about onboarding and continuity and everything like that. The last bit of news is that the National Classics Week packet is out now. So if you're interested in National Classics Week, which will be the week of April 21st this year, around Rome's birthday, like it always is, that information is now available. It's on our Facebook, it's on our Instagram. You can go check it out. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week. Bye, everybody. Cheers.